Betrayal, revenge, and a shocking twist. The story that broke the internet. Incredible drama! Imagine catching your wife with your own brother. That's exactly what Mark experienced in 24 hours. His life collapsed. Job lost, car taken away, family destroyed. But that's just the beginning. From sleeping in his car to a courtroom battle that left everyone frozen. When it seems things couldn't get worse. Suddenly! Daniel's story turns everything upside down. This is a betrayal that will shake you to your core. A man who trusted everyone, now alone against all. The judge was shocked by his revenge plan. Warning, 92% of viewers couldn't look away. From the first minute to the final verdict, this story will leave you speechless. Don't miss all 5 episodes of this sensation that the whole world is talking about.
I caught them together. What I did next will leave you speechless. Chapter 1. Perfect marriage destroyed by one text message. For Mark Turner, a sharply tailored 29-year-old Wall Street financial analyst, life wasn't just good. It was aggressively perfect, a curated tableau from a glossy New York magazine. His marriage to Sarah was the centerpiece of this ideal, a union whispered about in Manhattan circles for its opulent perfection. Their wedding, 3 years prior in the Grand Pierre Hotel, had been the event, a benchmark of uptown sophistication. Sarah, his 27-year-old wife, her Tiffany ring a beacon of flawless love, seemed the living embodiment of his ascent. But beneath this veneer of perfection, in their waterfront townhouse in Hoboken, shadowed by the glittering Manhattan skyline, a nightmare was taking root. And at the heart of this idyllic picture, like a malevolent shade, loomed David, his younger brother, a bond Mark considered sacred, an unbreakable pact of blood. Each morning began with deceitful tenderness, Sarah's warm skin under his touch, hushed promises of a day sculpted from domestic bliss. Then, the ritual of brewing strong coffee, its bitter aroma now a harbinger of dread. A kiss for his wife, increasingly detached, almost perfunctory, and he was off to the office, where his razor-sharp intellect and relentless work ethic had forged his reputation as a titan in the ruthless world of finance. Their life was punctuated by weekly dinners at the chic Bateo, where the Manhattan skyline shimmered in their expensive wine glasses. Empty luxury, meant to mask the rot gnawing at their perfect marriage. Returning each evening to their sleek townhouse, Mark still clung to the illusion of normalcy. Sarah greeted him with a brittle smile, and they'd invite David, staging their familial tableau. Laughter echoed at dinner, childhood memories surfaced. A meticulously crafted performance designed to conceal the truth, a venom seeping into everything. Mark, in his naivete, cherished these moments, basking in a false sense of security, oblivious to the web of deceit tightening around his world. But darkness was gathering. Weeks bled into months, and a sticky unease clung to Mark's heart. Sarah's shifts were subtle, almost imperceptible, yet all the more ominous. Fleeting distraction in her gaze, a hesitation in her voice, a coolness in her touch that even warm embraces couldn't mask. Initially, he rationalized it: stress, fatigue, the normal ebbs and flows. But instinct, that primal self-preservation, screamed of impending disaster. Sarah was spending increasing amounts of time out, often with David yoga classes on 14th Street, urgent repairs on their flawless townhouse, cryptic errands that dissolved into thin air, their hushed whispers behind closed doors, abruptly ended calls, extended absences under flimsy pretexts. Each detail clicked into a sinister mosaic. One day, seized by a chilling premonition, Mark breached Sarah's privacy, plunging into the chaos of her digital life. Amidst meticulously deleted messages and scrubbed calls, he stumbled upon her browser history, and his world tilted on its axis. Subreddit r/infidelity, a sordid den of the betrayed and the betrayers, and in her history, a blood-freezing query: how to hide an affair with a relative. Blood drained from his face. A ringing deafened his ears. This wasn't just suspicion. It was a verdict. Consumed by a desperate thirst for truth, Mark installed a hidden camera in the living room, yielding to the temptation to stare into the abyss. knowing he might unleash Pandora's box. He'd followed instructions gleaned from the internet's shadowed corners. Anonymous voices sharing tales of infidelity exposed. Evening descended, thick with dread. Returning home earlier than usual, Mark froze at the threshold, propelled by a terrible premonition. Stepping into the living room, he saw them, Sarah and David, entwined, fused in an unnatural embrace. On the sofa, the very one where they'd hosted countless family nights. To the saccharine strains of their song, Ed Sheeran's falsely tender Perfect, a soundtrack to their mangled love, mocking him from the speakers. Time warped, stretched into infinity as Mark's mind balked at the gruesome revelation. The coffee cup, symbol of his crumbling world, slipped from numb fingers, shattering on the parquet with a gunshot crack. Cries of horror choked in his throat. Sarah and David recoiled, as if burned, their faces, badges of shame and guilt. In the dim light, bare flesh flashed, the air thick with lust and betrayal. Sarah, trembling violently, clutched her gaping robe, desperately trying to conceal not just bare shoulders, but her deceitful soul. Her eyes, frightened, pleading for mercy, yet fundamentally irrevocably false. David, stumbling back towards the window where Manhattan skyscrapers glittered coldly, sought escape. His smug confidence evaporated, leaving only a pathetic imitation of a brother, mired in depravity. Mark watched it all in slow motion, each detail searing itself onto his memory. The camera, emotionless and stark, captured every second of this vile tableau. "Mark, it's not what you think," Sarah stammered, her voice cracking, a counterfeit note of remorse ringing hollow. David, ever the smooth-talking manipulator, lunged to her defense. "Bro, trust me, it's not as simple as it looks." But Mark was deaf to their pathetic excuses. The world he knew had ceased to exist. Marriage, family, brotherly loyalty, all collapsed, dissolving into the ashes of betrayal. He couldn't bear to look at them. Breathing the same air felt repulsive. Wordlessly, he spun on his heel, fleeing the apartment as if escaping plague. Chaos churned within. Humiliation, rage, paralyzing grief. Despair crashed over him, an overwhelming wave threatening to drown him whole. Bursting onto the street where the bittersweet scent of roasted chestnuts mingled with the acrid taste of betrayal, Mark wandered through Hoboken's night, blinded by pain. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles bone white. He had to run, vanish into the crowd, lest he shatter completely from the consuming despair. His closest kin, part of his very essence, had become executioners, striking a fatal blow to his heart. He was alone in the scorched remains of his life. Lost in a fog of desolation, Mark found himself before a bar, its neon sign a mocking flicker in the night. Without hesitation, he plunged inside, seeking oblivion at the bottom of a glass. Alcohol offered no solace, merely blurred the edges of reality, failing to erase the vile tableau of Sarah and David entwined. The betrayal by his wife and brother, a double-edged sword that had ripped his soul apart. Returning through the night towards the hated apartment, past the cold Franklin statue on the waterfront, Mark strayed into the digital refuge of the forsaken. Reddit. Fingers typed out words of raw despair. "To fool by trusting my wife and brother. Tonight, I start my perfect marriage revenge." And in response, from the digital void, poured a torrent of sympathy and sinister advice. The first comment, a twisted stroke of fate, pointed a path. Judge Smith in Newark, infidelity cases specialist. Look him up if you want blood. His steps grew heavy, his heart leaden. There was no turning back. Ahead lay emptiness, uncertainty. But in that moment, resolve hardened. Divorce inevitable. His world had crumbled, but in the wreckage, a thirst for vengeance ignited. The days that followed blurred into a fever dream. Lawyers, paperwork, courtrooms, an endless carousel of humiliation and agony. Mark was losing everything: job, home, the status symbol car. Divorce mutated into a catastrophe, threatening to bury his former life beneath its ruins. Depression descended like a shroud, poisoning each breath, stealing his will to live. Yet, even this wasn't enough. His family, once his anchor and solace, turned on Mark. They chose the side of the betrayers, blind to his suffering, deaf to the truth. Family pressure amplified his solitude, leaving him utterly forsaken, betrayed by all. In the darkest hours, thoughts of self-destruction became invasive. The pain of loss was unbearable, but deep within, a flicker of defiance persisted. Mark refused to become a victim, refused to let betrayal define his destiny. Slowly, gathering the shards of his will, he began to act. Meticulously, he collected evidence of his wife's infidelity, seeking cynical guidance from online communities, drawing strength from anonymous advice and the hollow comfort of strangers. His aim became more than just divorce, to expose the lie, reclaim his name, avenge his shattered life. Yes, he'd lost almost everything, but he wouldn't surrender the last vestiges of his dignity, or the hope for retribution. The legal war escalated. Mark's gaze turned cold, focused. The hunger for justice, for revenge, became his new guiding star. The path to vengeance promised to be long and agonizing, but Mark was ready to walk it to the bitter end. He was no longer a victim. He was a warrior, rising from the ashes of betrayal. And amidst the pain and hate, in the very heart of darkness, a fragile sprout of hope began to push through. Hope for rebirth. That after night, dawn inevitably breaks. Mark would rise. From shattered illusions, he would forge a new life. Harder.
Chapter 2. The weeks following Mark's discovery that his wife, Sarah, had cheated on him with his brother, David, became a relentless descent into hellish spirals. Everything he'd known collapsed like a castle of brittle glass, leaving him exposed in a frozen wasteland. The divorce, like a hurricane, ripped out the roots of his life, hurling him into chaos where every morning began with a knife twisting in his heart. Gone were the days of returning home to the warmth of her lips, to laughter that chimed like wind chimes in a summer breeze. Now he faced a haunted apartment where walls whispered of infidelity, and legal papers multiplied like poisonous mushrooms after rain. He stood amidst the wreckage of a dream, clutching shards of forever that cut his palms to bleeding. How could they? The question seared him like white-hot iron. Every dawn, Mark woke from nightmares where their bodies merged in a dance of betrayal, David's laughter echoing like a funeral bell. He tried shutting his eyes, but the visions haunted him even in daylight. Her fingers, once tender against his cheek, now clawed at his brother's shoulders. His own flesh and blood had become his enemy. Depression ensnared him tighter than a spider's web. He lost everything, his job, after his boss, wrinkling his nose in disgust, handed him a brown envelope with the words, "You've become unreliable." His home, a real estate agent, hauled his belongings onto the sidewalk like trash. Even his car was repossessed for debts, leaving him to wander the city where every cafe, every park echoed with her hollow promises. But the worst was yet to come. His family, his mother, whose hands once healed his childhood scrapes, now screamed into the phone, "You need to forgive them. David, he's your brother." His father stayed silent, while his sister texted, "Send money." Sarah's struggling. Betrayal had mutated into a virus, poisoning even the souls he'd called family. One night, shivering in the backseat of his former car, Mark stared at a photo on his phone, the three of them at a picnic, Sarah laughing with her head thrown back, David winking at the camera. The passion he'd once mistaken for brotherly love now burned in his chest as hatred. He hurled the phone against the wall, watching the glass shatter into 1,000 shards, a perfect mirror of his life. But in that darkness, a spark ignited. "No," he whispered, clenching his fists. "I won't be their victim." Like a demon summoned from the abyss, Mark began gathering evidence, Sarah's texts with David, where "sweetheart" morphed into "my love," hotel receipts under her name, even security footage from their apartment lobby, frames of them kissing as they hurried into the elevator. Each document became a brick in the wall of his vengeance. Then the letter arrived. Sarah's lawyer proposed an amicable settlement. Mark would surrender everything, and they'd forget about his aggression. He laughed, a bitter, jagged sound, as he tore the envelope to shreds. "You'll learn what aggression really means," he hissed, staring at the sunset staining the sky the color of bruises. At a cafe where Mark stopped to warm up, he bumped into Lisa, Sarah's friend. She tried to smile at his gaunt face. "Mark, you understand. Love's unpredictable." He stood, knocking over his chair. "Love?" His voice rang like a blade. "Ask your friend how much her unpredictability costs. Or ask my brother. He counts every penny." Lisa paled and fled, while Mark tasted the sweetness of revenge for the first time in months. Late that night, wandering the waterfront, he spotted a couple, a man hugging a woman, murmuring in her ear. Mark turned away, but then heard her laugh, too loud, too hollow. Pretense, he thought. They're all the same. But suddenly, the woman shoved the man. "Did you think I didn't know about your affairs?" Her voice trembled, yet held power. Mark froze, watching her walk away, chin lifted high. That moment became a drop of hope in his ocean of despair. Family. Those whose hands should have lifted him from the abyss became shadow daggers plunging into his back. "Mark, help." His mother's voice rang with false concern. "You won't leave David without support, will you?" His father stayed silent, while his sister sent a voice message, "Sarah's pregnant. They need money." Betrayal smelled metallic, like blood on snow. They didn't see his shattered soul, only a wallet to turn inside out. Like Martin from New World Depression, he stood on the edge, feeling the ground crumble beneath him. This wasn't a crisis, it was an apocalypse of trust. He lost everything. His job, the office that once praised him now slammed its doors, handing him a box of belongings. "You've become unpredictable." His home, the walls that once held whispers of love now stood silent, boarded up with court seals. Even the car where they'd kissed in the rain was towed away, leaving Mark stranded on the roadside of life. His world narrowed to a night shadow where he wandered like a ghost from a Suicide Boys music video, broken but not defeated. But deep in the heart of hell, a spark of rage ignited. Mark gathered evidence like an alchemist turning pain into weapons. Sarah's texts with David, "My love, he'll never suspect," voice notes of his brother laughing, "He's too naive." Every word became a nail in their coffin. His fury boiled like lava in Koe Wetzel's track, Depression and Obsession, where madness dances with hope. At 3 a.m., hunched over a cracked laptop screen in a hostel, Mark stumbled on a photo, a family dinner where David raised a toast to loyalty. He erupted, tearing a page from his notebook and scrawling, "Your lies will be your gallows." He mailed the note to his parents' empty house. Let them tremble. In the courtroom, Mark stood like a titan in ruins. Sarah's lawyer screeched, "He's the aggressor." But when Mark revealed the evidence, footage of their kisses in the elevator, receipts from the Tenderness Hotel, the air froze. The judge slammed the gavel, adultery proven. Victory smelled of gunpowder and freedom. Outside, Mark breathed deeply. His honor blazed like a sword forged in hell. Yes, he'd lost his family, his home, his past. But he'd gained something greater, himself. His story was no longer a fall, but a phoenix rising. After the trial, Mark sat in the emptied office where his financial triumphs once took shape. The walls, draped in gray velvet, now felt like a shroud. He dragged a finger across the dusty desk, leaving a trail like a scar on the skin of time. "Goodbye, old me," he whispered, clutching the court verdict. But in his chest smoldered a spark, not of hope, but ruthless fire. David and Sarah wouldn't stop. They'd pursue him like snakes, poisoning every fresh start. He found Sarah's address. Not her new penthouse, but the very apartment where they'd once picked out wallpaper. Lilac or lavender, she'd laughed back then. Now the windows glowed yellow, foreign, hostile. Mark lurked in the shadows, watching a limousine pull up. Out stepped Sarah, with a stranger in a $10,000 suit. His fingers dug into his palm as she laughed, tucking a strand of hair behind the man's shoulder. A scheme? Yes. Her cunning was sharper than he'd imagined. David hadn't just stolen his wife, he'd built an industry of betrayal. Mark returned home, if a bunker of cardboard boxes could even be called that. On the table lay files, transcripts, photos, even a recording of David's conversation with a corrupt lawyer. Let Mark pay alimony. He's a fool, he'll believe it, his brother snickered. In that moment, rage became fuel. He wouldn't just destroy them, he'd turn their sins into ash for them to choke on. His revenge became surgical, precise as a scalpel. Sarah dreamed of opening a boutique. Mark leaked her debts to investors. David bragged about his new Porsche. A week later, the car was impounded after drugs were accidentally found in the glove compartment. Every strike was poetry of vengeance, its verses written in the tears of those who'd laughed at his pain. But the crescendo came the night he sent them a letter. Not an email, a physical one, sealed in an envelope stamped from the abyss. Inside lay a photo of their first date and a note, "Your happy ending will cost you more than you stole. Wait for it." Now he stood on the threshold of a new life. In one hand, a contract with a company that valued his ruthless logic. In the other, a flash drive with data that could bury David in prison. But a question hung in the air like the stench of smoke after a fire. Who are you now? Avenger? Strategist? Ghost? The answer came on the wind. He tore up the contract, tossing the shreds into a trash bin. His future didn't belong to corporations. Opening his laptop, he dialed a new client, a hotel chain owner who hated David even more than he did. "Your move." "I'm your sword," Mark said, watching the sunset bleed across the sky.
What happens if he finds something he wasn't looking for? This is not just a story. It's a chain that knits everyone together. If you think you know the ending, you're in for a shock. Algorithms have already started recommending this video to those who have been searching for how to save a marriage and digital traces of infidelity. Are you next? Click the color now to be the first to see Mark's viral post turn into a weapon against himself. Leave a comment on whose turn is it. PS, see you in part 3 of the story.
Chapter 3, When Hearts Break in Parallel, a true story of betrayal and redemption. Attention! Have you ever felt your entire world collapse in an instant? Today, I'm sharing a story that might feel painfully familiar to many of you. As we continue our journey into the deepest secrets of relationships that stand the test of time, let's explore how two different support systems can completely change how we heal from betrayal. While Mark's world was crumbling around him, as we saw in our previous episode, a strikingly similar tragedy was unfolding in the life of 33-year-old Daniel in New York. I want you to imagine this. Like Mark, Daniel's marriage had been his sanctuary, his safe harbor in life's storms, but everything changed the moment he discovered his wife's shocking betrayal, a moment that would forever alter his path. Daniel had given his heart and soul to his wife, Emily, for over a decade. They had built what seemed like a perfect life together. A beautiful home in the suburbs, family dinners every Sunday, and a stepdaughter, Lily, whom Daniel had come to love as if she were his own flesh and blood. His family wasn't just important, they were the very center of his universe, a place where he could finally breathe after long days as a high-powered corporate attorney. "I always thought we had the kind of love that could weather any storm," Daniel later confessed to me, his voice breaking with emotion. "I never once imagined she could betray me like this." But ladies, you know how life sometimes delivers those moments that split our existence into before and after. For Daniel, that moment came on a warm Tuesday evening when he returned home early, his heart full of excitement about surprising Emily with a romantic dinner, something they hadn't done in months. As he approached their bedroom, carrying Emily's favorite flowers, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Hushed voices and the unmistakable sounds of passion coming from behind their bedroom door. Have you ever had that moment where your body knows the truth before your mind is ready to accept it? Hidden treasure. Pushing the door open with trembling hands, Daniel faced a sight that would haunt his dreams for years to come: his wife, Emily, tangled in an intimate embrace with none other than Lily's father, a man Daniel had welcomed into their home countless times, someone he had considered a friend. "Emily, what is this?" Daniel's voice barely escaped his throat, his entire body frozen in disbelief. The look on their faces, guilt mixed with fear, told him everything he needed to know. As they scrambled to cover themselves, stumbling over explanations and excuses, Daniel couldn't even process their words. All he could focus on was the shattering of everything he believed in, the trust he had placed in his wife now lying in pieces at his feet. This is where Daniel's story takes a dramatically different turn from Mark's experience. While Mark faced his betrayal alone, with his own family turning against him, as many of you shared in your comments on our last video, Daniel found himself surrounded by unwavering support. "My parents and siblings became my lifeline," Daniel shared. "When everything else was falling apart, they refused to let me drown in my pain." As news of Emily's infidelity spread, Daniel's family rallied around him without hesitation. His father, a man of few words, simply said, "We're here for you, son. You don't have to go through this alone." And in those simple words, Daniel found the strength to face what was coming. For many beautiful women experiencing loneliness after betrayal, this kind of family support can make all the difference between healing and spiraling into depression. The emotional toll of discovering infidelity can be overwhelming, especially in long-term marriages, but having people who believe in you can change everything. In the days and weeks that followed, Daniel's family became his foundation. They took turns staying with him, ensuring he ate and slept. They accompanied him to divorce proceedings, offering both emotional support and practical advice as he navigated the complex legal landscape of ending his marriage. "My sister Olivia would remind me daily, Emily's actions are not a reflection of your worth. You deserve so much better," Daniel recalled, his eyes filling with tears of gratitude. "Those words became my mantra on the darkest days." How many of you have been there, needing someone to remind you of your worth when betrayal makes you question everything? Share your experience in the comments below. As the final divorce hearing approached, Daniel prepared himself mentally and emotionally. He knew Emily and her lover would likely use every trick possible to gain advantage, but with his family beside him, he found the courage to stand firm and fight for the truth. Walking into that courtroom, Daniel felt a strange calm wash over him. When Emily entered with her affair partner, he felt anger rise within him, but unlike before, he could control it now. He wasn't there for revenge, he was there to reclaim his future and his dignity. The proceedings were intense and emotionally charged, exactly like many of you have described in your own divorce experiences after discovering secrets in your marriage. Each testimony felt like reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. But Daniel remained focused on the ultimate goal, freedom from betrayal and a chance to start again. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, validating the infidelity claims and ruling largely in Daniel's favor, the relief was overwhelming. The journey had been excruciating, but in that moment, Daniel felt the first real stirrings of hope. "I remember walking out of that courtroom feeling like I could breathe again for the first time in months," he told me. "The betrayal still hurt, but I wasn't defined by it anymore." This is such a crucial message for anyone going through similar pain, whether you're rebuilding after discovering your partner's secret romance or trying to reclaim your identity after years of dedicated marriage. The path to healing isn't about forgetting what happened, it's about refusing to let it determine your future. In the months that followed, Daniel gradually rediscovered joy in the small things: quiet evenings with a good book, Sunday brunches with his sister, the satisfaction of winning a difficult case at work. He began rebuilding his life piece by piece, creating a new normal that wasn't shadowed by betrayal. Then came a twist that tested his healing in unexpected ways. Daniel learned that Emily's lover had gotten another woman pregnant and abandoned Emily completely, leaving her to face the consequences of their affair alone. My first reaction was vindication, Daniel admitted. A part of me wanted to celebrate that karma had caught up with them. But as the initial satisfaction faded, Daniel found himself experiencing something unexpected: compassion. Not enough to welcome Emily back into his life, but enough to recognize that the cycle of pain needed to end somewhere. I realized that holding on to hatred was only hurting me, he explained. Letting go wasn't about forgiving what they did, it was about freeing myself from the burden of carrying that anger forever. How to bring passion back into your life after betrayal is one of the most common questions I receive from wonderful women in Texas and California who follow our channel. Daniel's journey offers a powerful template. Rebuilding doesn't mean erasing the past, but rather creating something new that honors your growth through pain. With each passing day, Daniel found himself growing stronger, more resilient, and increasingly optimistic about his future. The betrayal had broken him, but in rebuilding, he discovered parts of himself he never knew existed: strength, resilience, and the capacity for joy even after devastating loss. If I could tell your viewers one thing, Daniel said as we concluded our interview, it's that surviving betrayal is possible. Not just surviving, but eventually thriving. The path isn't linear, there are good days and terrible ones, but with the right support, you can emerge from this stronger than you ever imagined. And that, my dear friends, is perhaps the most important secret about relationships and betrayal. Our healing often depends less on what happened to us and more on who stands beside us as we rebuild. In our next episode, I'll be sharing Sophia's incredible story of how she reignited passion in her marriage when everything seemed lost. You won't believe the simple technique that saved her long-term relationship from divorce. Until then, remember that you are never alone in your journey. Our community of beautiful women stands with you, just as Daniel's family stood with him. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to look for our special, secret code, hidden somewhere in next week's video. Chapter 4. In the weeks following the divorce hearings, Daniel found himself navigating a complex web of emotions. While he had emerged victorious, with the infidelity of his ex-wife Emily and her lover exposed, there was still a lingering sense of unease that he couldn't quite shake. As he slowly began to rebuild his life, Daniel found himself confronted with the news that his former friend and affair partner had gotten another woman pregnant. The revelation sent a shockwave through him, stirring up a whirlwind of conflicting feelings. Initially, Daniel felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction. The man who had so callously betrayed him was now facing the consequences of his actions, his own life upended by the weight of his decisions. It was a bittersweet victory, a reminder that the toxic relationship he had once been a part of was truly over. But as the initial anger subsided, Daniel found himself overcome with a more complex array of emotions. There was a twinge of pity for Emily, his former wife, who now had to grapple with the fallout of her lover's actions. Despite the pain she had caused him, Daniel couldn't help but feel a glimmer of empathy for the predicament she now found herself in. The knowledge that his ex-wife's lover had moved on, leaving her to deal with the aftermath, was a sobering realization. It served as a stark reminder that the betrayal he had endured was not a unique or isolated incident, but rather a testament to the complexities and fragility of human relationships. As Daniel reflected on the past few months, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the way he had handled the situation. Unlike Mark, who had been left to navigate the aftermath of his wife's betrayal largely on his own, Daniel had the unwavering support of his family. They had been his rock, offering a steady stream of emotional support and practical assistance throughout the tumultuous divorce proceedings. Daniel knew that he owed a great deal of his resilience to the love and care of his family. Their presence had been a constant source of strength, a reminder that he was not alone in his fight. They had listened to his anguish, validated his feelings, and encouraged him to stand firm in the face of adversity. In contrast, Mark's story had unfolded in a drastically different manner. While Daniel had found solace in the embrace of his loved ones, Mark had been betrayed not only by his wife and brother but also by his own family, who had chosen to side with the very people who had shattered his world. The stark contrast between the two men's experiences only served to highlight the importance of a strong support system, especially in the aftermath of such devastating betrayals. Daniel knew that he had been fortunate, that his family's unwavering loyalty had been a crucial factor in his ability to navigate the emotional minefield and emerge stronger on the other side. As he continued to rebuild his life, Daniel found himself drawn to Mark's story, intrigued by the parallels and the differences between their journeys. He couldn't help but wonder how Mark was faring, whether he had managed to find the strength to fight back and reclaim his life. One day, while sifting through the remnants of his past life, Daniel stumbled upon a news article that shed light on Mark's situation. The article detailed the legal battle he had waged, his unwavering determination to expose the truth about his wife's infidelity and his brother's betrayal. Reading the article, Daniel felt a surge of admiration for Mark's resilience. Despite being abandoned by his own family and stripped of everything he had once held dear, the man had refused to give up. He had fought tooth and nail, meticulously gathering evidence and refusing to be silenced by the weight of his circumstances. The article painted a vivid picture of Mark's journey, chronicling his descent into depression, his fight to regain his footing, and his ultimate triumph in the courtroom. Daniel was struck by the raw authenticity of the narrative, the way it captured the emotional turmoil and the sheer force of will that Mark had summoned to overcome the devastating blow he had suffered. As he read on, Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of kinship with this stranger. They had both been thrust into the depths of despair, their lives shattered by the betrayal of those closest to them. But while Daniel had been fortunate enough to have his family's support, Mark had been left to navigate the aftermath alone, forced to confront the darkest corners of his own psyche. The more Daniel learned about Mark's story, the more he felt compelled to reach out, to offer a word of encouragement or a gesture of solidarity. He knew all too well the weight of the burden Mark had carried, the overwhelming sense of isolation that came with having the very foundation of one's life crumble beneath one's feet. With a newfound sense of purpose, Daniel set out to find a way to connect with Mark, to offer a glimmer of hope in the midst of the darkness. He understood that the journey towards healing and redemption was not a solitary one, and that the support of others could make all the difference in the world. As Daniel delved deeper into Mark's story, he was struck by the similarities between their experiences, but also the divergent paths they had taken. While Daniel had been able to lean on his family for support, Mark had been forced to sever ties with his own, a decision that Daniel could only imagine had been agonizingly difficult. Yet, despite the seemingly insurmountable odds, Mark had persevered, his determination fueling his every step. Daniel couldn't help but admire the man's resilience, the way he had refused to be defined by the betrayal he had suffered. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human soul, a reminder that even in the face of the most devastating setbacks, there was always the possibility of redemption. As Daniel contemplated reaching out to Mark, he couldn't help but feel a sense of kinship and a deep respect for the man's journey. In a world where betrayal and heartbreak were all too common, it was heartening to witness the triumph of the human spirit, the ability to rise from the ashes and reclaim one's life. With a newfound resolve, Daniel set out to find a way to connect with Mark, to offer a hand of friendship and support. He knew that the road ahead would not be an easy one, but he was determined to be a beacon of hope in the darkness, a reminder that no one had to face the aftermath of betrayal alone. In the days that followed, Daniel immersed himself in Mark's story, studying the details of his legal battle and the obstacles he had overcome. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and admiration for the man's unwavering commitment to justice and his refusal to be silenced by the weight of his circumstances. As he continued to follow Mark's journey, Daniel found himself drawn to the themes of resilience, redemption, and the power of choice that wove through the narrative. It was a story that resonated with him on a deeply personal level, a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome even the most daunting of challenges. With a renewed sense of purpose, Daniel knew that he had to find a way to reach out to Mark, to offer a connection, a shared understanding of the pain and the triumph that came with the aftermath of betrayal. He was determined to be a source of support, a reminder that there were others who had walked a similar path and emerged stronger for it. As he contemplated the best way to approach Mark, Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He knew that the road ahead would not be an easy one, but he was prepared to face it head-on, driven by the belief that the power of human connection could be a transformative force in the lives of those who had been shattered by the betrayal of those they had once trusted the most. With a deep breath, Daniel set out to find Mark, determined to forge a bond that would not only offer solace and support but also serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Chapter 5, Epilogue, A New Beginning.
Warning! What happens when a man loses everything, his wife, his brother, his family, and still finds the courage to rebuild? This incredible healing journey will change the way you view betrayal forever.
It had been nearly a year since Mark's world had come crashing down around him, the devastating betrayal of his wife Sarah and his own brother David leaving him shattered and adrift. The legal battle had been long and arduous, but in the end, Mark had emerged victorious, the truth of his ex-wife's infidelity exposed for all to see. As he stepped out into the bright sunlight, Mark felt a sense of freedom he hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity. The weight of the past had not been lifted entirely, but there was a newfound lightness in his step, a renewed sense of purpose that had been absent during the darkest days of his ordeal. "I survived what should have destroyed me," he whispered to himself, the warm breeze carrying his words into the universe as a testament to his resilience. Gone were the days of living out of his car, of scraping by on the bare minimum while his toxic family members begged him for financial assistance. Mark had reclaimed his life, rebuilding it from the ashes of his shattered dreams with a determination that surprised even himself. In the aftermath of the divorce, Mark had taken a step back, severing ties with the family members who had turned their backs on him. It had been a difficult decision, one that had left him feeling adrift and alone, but he knew deep down that it was a necessary act of self-preservation. With his newfound freedom, Mark had thrown himself into his work, pouring his energy into rebuilding his career. The promotion he had earned in the midst of his personal turmoil had been a lifeline, a chance to regain a sense of purpose and stability in the chaos that had consumed him. As he walked the bustling city streets, Mark couldn't help but marvel at the transformation he had undergone. Gone was the broken, defeated man who had once stumbled through life, his spirit crushed by the weight of betrayal. In his place stood a resilient, self-assured individual, one who had stared down the abyss and emerged stronger for it. The journey had not been an easy one, and there were still moments when the memories of Sarah and David's betrayal threatened to overwhelm him. But Mark had learned to confront those demons head-on, to embrace the pain and the anger as necessary steps towards healing and redemption. Imagine a moment of calm, the soft whisper of possibility, the gentle touch of self-discovery, and the profound realization that sometimes losing everything is the doorway to finding yourself truly, a gift disguised as devastation. In the quiet moments of reflection, Mark would often think back to the pivotal decision he had made to cut ties with his toxic family members. It had been a difficult choice, one that had left him feeling isolated and adrift, but in the end, it had been the catalyst for his transformation. By severing those unhealthy connections, Mark had freed himself to focus on his own well-being, to prioritize his own needs and to surround himself with people who truly understood and supported him. It was a decision that had not come easily, but one that had ultimately paved the way for his remarkable recovery. Now, remember, every moment matters, every heartbeat is a promise of new beginnings, so cherish every second. Mark had written in his journal the night before, words that now guided his steps forward. As Mark walked, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the person he had become. The scars of his past were still visible, a testament to the trials he had endured, but they no longer weighed him down. Instead, they served as a reminder of his strength, of the resilience that had carried him through the darkest of times. In the months that followed, Mark had slowly rebuilt his life, one step at a time. He had found a new apartment, one that felt like a sanctuary, a space untainted by the memories of his former life. He had cultivated a network of supportive friends, people who had stood by him throughout his ordeal and who now celebrated his triumphs. And perhaps most importantly, Mark had rediscovered his passion for his work, throwing himself into his role with a renewed vigor and determination. The promotion he had earned had been a turning point, a tangible sign that he was more than the sum of the betrayal he had suffered. This is what reclaiming your power looks like, he thought, when you refuse to let someone else's betrayal define your story. As he walked the familiar streets, Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in how far he had come. The journey had been arduous, filled with moments of despair and self-doubt, but he had emerged from the ashes stronger and more resilient than ever before. In the distance, Mark caught sight of a familiar face, a former colleague, someone he had once considered a friend. The man's eyes widened with surprise as he recognized Mark, and for a moment, Mark felt a twinge of trepidation, the memories of his past still fresh in his mind. But as the man approached, his expression shifted from one of surprise to one of genuine warmth and admiration. "Mark, is that you? I hardly recognized you." Mark couldn't help but smile, the tension in his shoulders easing as he shook the man's hand. "It's good to see you," he replied, his voice steady and confident. The two men exchanged pleasantries, and as they did, Mark couldn't help but feel a surge of pride in the transformation he had undergone. Gone was the broken, defeated man he had once been. In his place stood an individual who had reclaimed his life, who had risen above the darkness and embraced a future filled with endless possibilities. As the conversation drew to a close, the former colleague grasped Mark's hand, his eyes shining with a newfound respect. "I'm glad to see you doing well, my friend. You've been through a lot, but it's clear that you've come out the other side stronger than ever." Mark nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm grateful for the journey. It's taught me a lot about myself and what I'm capable of." With a final handshake and a heartfelt farewell, the two men parted ways, and Mark continued on his path, his steps lighter, his spirit buoyed by the encounter. As he walked, Mark couldn't help but reflect on the parallel journey of the other man he had come to know through the shared experience of betrayal, Daniel, the 33-year-old whose wife had also been unfaithful. Mark had followed Daniel's story with a keen interest, drawn to the similarities and the differences in their respective experiences. "I thought I knew what strength was," Mark reflected, "but I was wrong. True strength isn't avoiding pain, it's walking through it and emerging whole on the other side." While Daniel had found solace in the unwavering support of his family, Mark had been forced to navigate the aftermath of his betrayal largely on his own family members turning against him in the wake of the scandal. And yet, both men had emerged from the ashes of their shattered lives, reclaiming their dignity in their sense of purpose. Mark knew that their stories were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of the most devastating betrayals, there was always the possibility of redemption. It was a lesson he had learned the hard way, but one that he now carried with him, a guiding light in the uncertain terrain of his future. Attention! You have discovered the secret. Now, listen carefully. Healing from betrayal doesn't mean forgetting, it means building something so beautiful that your past becomes merely a chapter, not the whole story. As he continued on his way, Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism, a renewed sense of purpose that had been absent during the darkest days of his ordeal. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he no longer feared the unknown. Instead, he embraced it, ready to face whatever challenges lay in store, armed with the knowledge that he had the strength and the determination to overcome them. In the distance, the sun began to set, painting the sky in a breathtaking array of colors. Mark paused for a moment, taking in the sight, a sense of peace washing over him. It was a reminder that even in the midst of the darkest of times, there was always the promise of a new dawn, a chance to start anew and to embrace the endless possibilities that lay before him. With a deep breath, Mark continued on his way, his steps steady and sure. He knew that the journey ahead would not be an easy one, but he was no longer afraid to face it head-on. The betrayal he had suffered had changed him, forged him into a stronger, more resilient individual, and he was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had been through the fire, and he had emerged from it, his spirit unbroken and his determination unshakable. This wasn't just survival, this was rebirth. This wasn't just moving on, this was transformation. No, wait, stop, don't do this. The voice of fear had once whispered in his darkest moments. But Mark had learned to silence that voice, to trust in his own strength and his own worth. And now, as he stood at the threshold of a new chapter in his life, Mark felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. The past no longer defined him, it merely informed who he had become. And who he had become was someone worthy of love, respect, and happiness. This is what it means to truly heal from betrayal, not by forgetting the past, but by refusing to let it dictate your future. Mark's journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, he was excited to see where it would lead. Coming next, Story 3, Shattered Ties.
Are you ready for an even more shocking tale of betrayal that will leave you speechless? Join us next week for Shattered Ties, the story of a woman who discovered her husband's 15-year affair with her sister. How did she rebuild her life after losing her marriage and her family? What secret strength did she discover that helped her not just survive, but thrive? This powerful story of female resilience will inspire anyone who's ever felt betrayed, abandoned, or lost. If you've ever wondered how to rebuild your confidence after betrayal or find love again after 40, this is the story that will change everything you thought you knew about healing. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss this life-changing story. Our community of strong women supporting each other grows stronger with every shared experience. Remember to leave a comment below about what Mark's journey taught you. Did his story help you see your own path to healing differently?
I drift in your shadow, your breath keeps me still. The night wraps around us, bends time to my will. In dreams we are endless, no space in between. A place made of whispers where silence can sing. Take me to sleep where the stars never end. Lost in the rhythm, we don't have to pretend. Floating in waves where the night will defend. Take me to sleep where the stars never end. Hands, 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 hands. Every beat pulls me deeper inside. Your touch is a current, a velvet tide. Oh, wake me now, let this feeling abide. In your arms, I'm forever.